Hi class, this is week 6, so we're all pretty used to this part now, but here's our pre-flight check. Make sure you've got your audio and video right. Make sure that your virtual space is set up. Make sure that you have set all of those no interruption things. Okay, so your pre-flight check, take your time and do that. I'm going to go ahead and do mine. Let's see, is my record light on? Yes, it is. Can you all hear me? I can see my share position is on. This is where I would ask you to confirm with me in a live class. So let's get rolling. So welcome to class 6 then. We have been thinking in the last few weeks about how to make our popular culture classes more rigorous and of high academic quality. We want to make sure that they are accessible and that they're still fun for our students too. So in the last few weeks, we have talked about a couple of things. We have talked about countering misperceptions in the academic community about our subject matter, which is why we want this to be rigorous, right? And we've discussed some of the tougher background theories that we as the educators need to understand as we are developing content. Today's session, though, we're going to start to be refocusing back on the in-class experience, back on the students and what we're going to do during class sessions. We are going to look at the community of inquiry model, and we're going to consider how we could use it in a popular culture classroom. So we're going to be using the textbook today, so please make sure that you've got your copy out. So our big idea, today's big idea, we learn best by learning with others. We learn best by learning with others. So some learning objectives. By the time we're done, at the end of this unit, including the writing that you're going to do on your own, we should be able to do these things. We should be able to give an example of what John Dewey meant by reflective thinking. We ought to be able to define key terms in our own words. We should be able to distinguish between group work and community of inquiry. We ought to be able to suggest ways of engaging learners in a process of inquiry. We should be able to list some advantages of collaborative learning and provide a specific link of how this content might link to our own subject areas. So quite often when we all hear ideas like collaboration or thinking together, many of us have that jerk reaction of, I hate group work. It's the worst. It is so frustrating. I always end up doing all the work. It's just terrible. Of course, yes, poorly designed group work assignments are frustrating, but working in a community of inquiry is so much more than group work. We've also heard a lot about the solitary genius. Okay? It's often why a lot of us kind of kick against group work. It's like, the others are going to hold me back. I'm so smart. I can do it on my own. I'm going to have to explain it to everybody else. Well, gosh, Newton, kind of the quintessential solitary genius, even he was against this idea. So if I've seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. Right? So a lot of the time, if we are working on our own, it often ends up being more like this poor kid on the other side, right? It's boring, it's lonely, it's frustrating, it's just no fun at all. So effective group work, it can help us fill in the gaps in our knowledge. If we're stuck, we can ask other people, we can solve harder problems than we can individually. In short, we're just more than the sum of our parts. So we are going to do an activity. I'm going to ask you to pause the lecture. I'm going to ask you to brainstorm your answers to two-part prompt. First of all, think of a time when working with others to solve a problem did not work. Let's get some of those negatives out of the way first. So what went wrong? What was that like? Now you're going to think of a time when working with others did solve a problem. Worked. What was that like? Now I am putting a YouTube video over here in chat, and you're going to watch this and think about how is collaborative learning different from the group work you've experienced in school, looking at the model that they are using in this video. What do you think of that? It's okay to have some criticisms. This is not meant to be groupthink, right? Okay. So when you're done, put your answers in the discussion board thread for this week. Come on back later in the week and reply to at least 2 of them. Okay, so go ahead, pause the lecture, 2-part brainstorm, watch the video, react. Okay, so we're going to, now that we've warmed up, we're going to think about the content from the textbook. Let's start off with John Dewey. He's a key thinker in the fields of both education and philosophy. But do not make the mistake that I did when I was once trying to impress a professor and start talking about his work in library science. He is not the Dewey Decimal System guy. So when we are using this system, we want to think about reflective. We want to start thinking about deeper levels of not just sitting and thinking. It's not just sitting and pondering. It involves critical thinking. Okay? So Dewey is saying that this means engaging with the ideas of other people and with society. So Rodin's thinker over here on the left, he might be having some really deep thoughts, right? But unless he engages with other people, either in person or through their writings or in some virtual way, he'll never know if his ideas have flaws, if they're original, if they're biased, or if they could just simply be better in some way. So we need to interact with others, or as like Dewey might put it, we need to engage in practical inquiry. The thinker wrestling with that chicken and egg question over here is engaging with others. She might look like she's on her own, but she's engaging with others through their written works. And she is, as Newton might say, standing on their shoulders. So here's now our second textbook activity. Again, you're going to pause the presentation. This time you're going to pull up PowerPoint, and you're going to use the 2-content slide template, like this slide is used. Open up the book, pages 14 to 15, and you're going to reread the material about Dewey and Vygotsky. Okay, in one block, you're going to summarize what Garrison most wants us to know about Dewey. And in the other block, the same thing, but about Vygotsky. If you want to use bullet points, that's just fine, but you need to be very focused. You've got to get those ideas tightly condensed onto the slide. When you're done, you are going to go to our Google Docs site and add the slide to the shared study guide. Make sure you put your name in the notes area. And again, you're going to come back later in the week and see how others have summarized the same material. Perhaps they had something that you missed. They had a different take on it. Okay? This is all about our collaborative thinking. So the sage on the stage model and the filling a bucket model still persist, right? The idea that knowledge needs to be built and discovered by students. So with that teacher as that died by the side idea, this is now like key to this idea of constructivism. What constructivism means is that we learn through building meaning. Okay? But without that guide, we can still go very wrong. We don't know what we're doing. There's way too much trial by error. So it's not true that experts no longer have a place in the classroom. They're just not cramming that material into us. So students do construct meaning, but we as students, we do this in cooperation with others. So we're not empty vessels to be filled. We've got a role in building that sandcastle, even if our dad is helping us. So collaboration, though, can go astray without diversity and truly authentic communication. We've all seen those the perils of groupthink, right, where everybody just starts chiming in and saying, "Oh, I agree." You know, on really bad discussion boards, for example, okay? Or in groups with a big power imbalance where people are afraid to speak up, or one dominant person kind of starts to take over. We can perhaps think, though, of distributed cognition, okay, that key phrase from in the book, and working together amongst peers as close to something like crowdsourcing. Okay? We're all using these different pieces of knowledge from all over the place. We're bringing them together, but leadership is still a factor. We still want to make sure that somebody is making some of those tougher decisions, that they're pulling together, that we're not just going to go completely off the rails. So here's our other textbook activity, the second of the two. Here, you're going to pause the lecture again. This time we're going to use the glossary and flashcard area of our group study guide over at Google Docs. And you're going to choose two of the words or phrases that I've listed out here. You're going to write a short explanation in your own words. You're going to paraphrase this. Of what the phrase means in this context, okay, in context of our textbook and what we're talking about, not what it might mean in some other context. Keep to the space that the study guide allows, okay, so you're going to have to be pretty tight with this. Just as a hint, terms can all be found between pages 16 and 20. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time flipping around, okay? Go ahead and pause. Jump on over to our study guide area and pick out two terms. So now we want to start thinking about our big idea, right? How are we going to start applying it to what we want to work on into our field? So remember, our big idea this week is we learn best by learning with others. We've explored some of that theory and research behind it by reading Garrison. We've reviewed it together in this presentation. Practical question then is, how can we use these ideas in our own classes? Our challenge is to learn what we've learned about pedagogy and about our own content areas and make the two work together. So, what are your ideas for how to integrate the material into your own fields? This is the topic of this week's blog entry that you're going to complete later. So here's my own example then. So at the risk of being a little too on the nose, I like to be transparent with my pedagogy. Letting students know why we're doing something I think is really, really important. So I might use pop culture itself to lead a discussion about what I'm trying to get us to do. So a discussion about collaboration, competition, shared knowledge. My 4 images on the screen could prompt a free write or a discussion about either working together, sharing knowledge and piecing together clues, respecting others, and so on. Our pop culture studies areas are just absolutely full of examples of creative groups working together to build projects. I mean, TV shows, music, all of these things, but building projects and worlds together about what fans do when they get together. So what could you get students to do to emulate those models? What could you do to encourage them to take what they're probably already very interested in, otherwise they wouldn't be in our pop culture class, and start applying it to how they learn together? So this week we focused on chapter 2 of Garrison's book. We learned about the power of collaborative and distributive thinking and how those ideas are rooted in Dewey and Vygotsky. We were reminded about the fallacy of the sage on the stage and the power of having students build and discover knowledge with some expert guidance. We also thought about linking to our own areas and leveraging our content. So our closing activity, this is what we do every week, so you should be familiar, but just to remind you, we're going to do a minute paper. This means that you write literally just for a minute. Okay, so open up an email, because you can send it to me that way. Okay, and our usual 2 questions. What's the big point you learned in class today? Please don't repeat back the big idea. Okay, what did you learn and take away? Okay. What's the main thing that you're still not sure about? A big unanswered question, something you want to know more about, something you're confused about. Okay? You're going to send this to me as an email. You do have my email in the syllabus, but I'm going to put it right now into chat for you so that you can grab it quickly for your convenience. sarah.mcginley@wright.edu. Okay. So just 1 or 2 quick things to wrap up here. This week I am going to be at the Comic Expo downtown on Tuesday between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock. So if you'd like to drop by and visit with me, in addition to coming to office hours, of course, which you're always very welcome to, come on by the conference center downtown. I will be at the manga exhibit. I'm helping out with that as a volunteer. I will be there. You know what I look like. Here I am on webcam so that you can see me. But you'll also be able to spot me because I will have my very exciting Hello Kitty tiara on. Okay, so just to wrap up just a little bit here, come on by and visit with me. I'm really excited to read all of your responses. I've enjoyed them every week, so I'm looking forward to those. Don't forget to get everything in on time. Don't forget to go back and visit each other's pages to follow up. Okay? And that is all. I will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.